What's the worst thing you've had to do after losing a bet? I had to impersonate Homer Simpson for a week. I nearly killed my son and now my wife is filing for divorce. A month ago, I was at a bar with my best friend Dan drinking. Drinking a lot, might I add. Both of us are huge fans of card games, and we usually brought a deck with us to the bar. Occasionally, we would play each other for small amounts of cash, or some kind of small dare. Well, this particular night Dan beat me. I lost and I was set to pay up $25. Problem was, I had no cash on me, and so Dan thought of a forfeit. He said that the only way he was going to scrap this $25 loan was if I imitated a cartoon character around my family for the next 2 weeks. Except there was a twist. I was not allowed to tell them about the bet, or which character I was imitating. Being a 40-year-old man, I grew up on The Simpsons, and since I was already in a bar, I decided the best character would be Homer Simpson. The next day when I woke up, it dawned on me what I had set myself up for, and so my act began. For the next 2 weeks I was set to be a laughingstock, and prosecuted as a mentally ill man, but I was a man of my word, and it seemed like it would be fun. I started with shaving my head. My wife was distraught as she loved my hair, but I convinced her this was for the better. I started the morning at the table with the kids by cracking open a can of beer and doing my best Homer Simpson impersonation by eating enough to kill a cow. I was a man on a mission to be Homer. By the end of my workday, I was starting to enjoy being Homer Simpson. I came home to dinner, and washed it down with a beer with my wife and kids. She looked at me and told me we needed to talk. "Honey, just relax, it's all okay," I said in my best Homer voice. She damn near kicked me out of the chair as she dragged me upstairs to give me an earful. The whole time I stood there, knowing I was going to refuse to drop the act. Day 2 was the same. Working was rough, but like I said, I was committed. My boss called me into his office to ask what the hell was going on. He wanted to know why I wasn't adhering to the dress code, and what the stupid shenanigans were about. I couldn't let the gig up now, so I told him I just wasn't feeling myself. He let me off with a serious warning. When I came home I kept the dare going, informing Dan of what I was doing the whole time with photo evidence. I'm sure he was laughing his butt off. This time when eating with my family I noticed my son acting up. He is only 8 years old, and I decided that if I wanted to commit to this act, I had to do it right. My son said something and I cut him off, "Oh you little," and lunged for him. I wrapped my arms around his neck and squeezed as hard as I could. My wife instantly jumped at me and smacked me over the head with the frying pan she was holding, and after I let go of my son, my wife took him and they stayed with her sister for the night. In the morning I got a text from her. It read, "What the hell is wrong with you? You've changed, in a really weird and creepy way. You've started drinking at the table and you're constantly acting like you're mentally challenged. Are you back on those hardcore substances? You told me you got clean on those. I really do love you, but what the hell? You almost killed your own son last night. I'm sorry, but I am this close to filing for divorce. I'm not going to lie, reading that message hurt a lot." I texted Dan, pleading that although it's only been 3 days, he please let me finish with the act. He texted back, saying that a deal was a deal. I figured my wife would be home soon, and since I was on leave, I should be able to survive the next week and a half. I didn't know how wrong I was. My wife actually came home that night, but without our son later that night. She was adamant on having a serious talk with me. I was tipsy at this point, and she started crying when she saw me. That's when I, due to my emotions, being tipsy, and partially still being Homer, started laughing hysterically at her. I couldn't hold this facade any longer, and explained to her what the whole thing was. I showed proof of it all with my text with Dan, but I was mistaken in thinking she would forgive me. Instead I was met with a punch so hard, it actually fractured my jawbone. She left again, and this time I texted her, saying I never meant to kill our son, I was just doing it as part of the act. As it turned out, the reason my son wasn't with my wife that day was because he was in the hospital suffering from a serious neck injury. I told her I didn't mean it, and that she shouldn't blame me, but should blame Homer instead. I do feel bad about what I did, but at the time I was also kind of impressed with my stellar performance. The next day when I contacted her she told me she was filing for divorce. Now, being sober, I realized what I had done and fully broke down. I cried so much that night. I called her many times, and blew up her phone with messages, but to no avail. To make matters worse, I had overslept for work that day, and when I came into work I was fired on the spot. In the span of a week I had lost my kid, my wife, and job, all over a stupid bed. The cherry on top was my wife tried to admit me into a psych ward a little while later, but thankfully I was able to avoid going. I don't know how Marge put up with this for so long.